Hi there, this is Robbie Jeanette with Keyboard Magazine, and I'm sitting here with Mr. Alan Parsons, who almost needs no introduction, and Mr. Dave Kerzner of Sonic Reality. And we are here to talk about a project that they are working on called the Alan Parsons Sample Project. So you have gone through the trouble of using the original keyboards through the original mixing board to get these samples. How did this come about?
Well, I think it's, Dave should take credit for coming up with the idea of doing it, and he happens to run a company that does very well in the sampling business. So,
yes.
Dave does all the donkey work, all the playing each note, once, and then playing it hard, and then playing it quiet, and then playing the next note, and then that takes hours, and it takes
Indeed.
Untold patience to do it. So.
And then going back and revisiting these keyboards that you used, so you had, of the keyboards on Dark Side, there weren't very many. You had the EMS synth, the Synthy, which was On the Run, the famous piece that can only be created through that synthesizer. You actually have one of those of your own. Can you describe a little bit of how that actually is used to create On the Run?
Sure. Well, first of all, in order to do this, we had to procure all of those keyboards and all the effect pedals and everything to get that authentic sound. For the EMS Synthy, there's a built-in sequencer, and it does the pattern, and we've done similar patterns. We've actually done other patterns that are in the style of, so the purpose of the sample library isn't just so that you could sound and recreate Dark Side of the Moon, but that you could have the flavors of sound that you hear. A lot of people listen to records that were made back then and say, wow, how come records don't sound like that? And some of it has to do with the way it's engineered, the way it's processed, and the vintage pedals and the instruments. So the Synthy definitely has its own sound, the VCS3 and everything. The Rhodes was played on Breathe. It was played through Leslie.
Oh, nice. So
we've sampled that, and that's a different sound. And so a lot of the instruments, the Wurlitzer, they have maybe the way Alan EQ'd it and certain things, compression, and so we've tried to capture a mix of the vintage instruments and the processing to get those flavors.
So you want people to be able to create their own new music out of this. In revisiting these tracks and actually going through the process of re-engineering, what did you maybe discover about the way that you did things back then that you were kind of pleasantly surprised to revisit?
The interesting thing is that I really haven't changed my my overall strategy for recording in all the years since '72. I mean, I essentially treat a guitar amp the same way now as I did then.
In the engineering and the production of a record like Dark Side of the Moon, the separation in the mix and how things are able to sit in this nice cohesive song and yet be so audible, I think it's something, not like a holy grail, but something that a lot of people struggle with, because you have so much EQ overlap, you have placement overlap, and you seem to do a remarkable job at making everything so audible in the fidelity. And I'm wondering, you say your methods haven't changed since '72. Not to be flippant and say what are the secrets of that, but what are some of the methodology?
It's always a case of if you get good sounds to start with, it's going to sound good on the record, and I think never more so than basic sound. A good sounding drum kit is going to come over as a good sounding drum sound on record. Same with guitars, basses, keyboards. And I think a lot of it is down to arrangement as well. It's not just sound. It's how the arrangement works in the context of the song as well.
So I'm just wondering if you can maybe enlighten us a little bit to how you approach recording piano in a rock band.
Well, the piano was of course always a nightmare if you were recording it at the same time as the rhythm section. There was no way that you weren't going to pick up at least the drums on the piano mics. There was one trick that I discovered. You would think, okay, if you've got a problem with separation between the drums and the keyboard and the piano, move the piano away as far as possible, screen it off, do all that. But in fact, the solution to the problem is the exact opposite. You move it as close to the drums as you possibly can.
Really?
Then you get rid of the time delay, which is half the problem. And then separation is not just the sound of the unwanted instrument, it's the delay, it's the time it's taken to reach that instrument. So I used to mic the piano, I used to place the piano literally, the drum kit here and the piano here, and then the guy's literally on top of the drums. I mean, screened off, of course. Yes. Yeah. And blankets, all the stuff that you need to
and that would force you into a close miking situation because,
Oh, you had to, yeah, there's no way you could mic a piano distant with bass drums.
Were you more a fan of miking up close on the hammer area or more of the soundboard itself?
It would depend. It would depend on the player, the piano, just how things were. But generally, right above the hammers, one of the towards the treble end, one towards the bass end, and again depending on how wide the player's part was. I mean, if he was had a fairly narrow stretch of keys, then you'd move the mics close. If he really used the keyboard, then you'd put them further apart.
A song like Great Gig in the Sky, obviously one of the most iconic piano-based Pink Floyd tunes, starts out with such lovely isolated solo piano and then the band kicks in. Was that recorded at the same time as the band, or was that an overdub?
It was, but it was in a different studio.
Oh.
So that's what made it. It was essentially completely separate. He was in the. Rick was playing a big Bosendorfer full concert grand in the classical studio at Abbey Road No. 1.
Nice.
And so we used classical mic technique. We had some reasonably close mics and some ambient mics way up in
the rafters.
In the rafters, yeah.
Nice. We've recreated this for the Alan Parsons Sample Project Volume 1. Volume 1 deals with some of the sounds from that time at Abbey Road, and so we sampled a Bosendorfer Imperial Grand, and we used the similar miking with the KM86, Neumann KM86s for the direct, and the room mics were Neumann
49s, probably 49s, 50s. Yeah.
This is Volume 1. So
Right.
what will Volume 2 contain?
The goal that we try to do, we did a project with Ken Scott, Epic Drums, and we did Neil Peart drums. What we're trying to do with Sonic Reality is, our motto is sample everything. And we've sampled orchestral instruments, drums, every brand of drums, every brand of guitar, and that kind of thing. But then there are specific production and engineering elements or processing or specific rare instruments that belong to somebody or whatever it is. We try to uncover those, holy grail sounds that people are like, wow, if I could only get that sound.
Yeah.
So we take it out and you can now use it in your music. So one of the interesting things about doing this with Alan is that it's such a long career of really iconic sounds, unique sounds, that he's been involved with, and so so you asked what's in Volume 2. I mean, Alan Parsons' project selects sounds, some different things, certain vocals. I mean, there's some interesting things that I've discovered that I didn't even know what it was, like the bridge of Games People Play.
Yeah.
There's these percussion sounds, and I learned that was actually a human voice. That was the singer Lenny doing these animal noises and percussion sounds. So things like that.
Very Spinal Tap. Yeah.
So you have this extension here, which is just very low, the note of doom. So every note's going to have a different sort of response, like a reverb. You can hear that. So that's how we do it. 97 keys on a keyboard, which is, I prefer it. Get that low note. It's going to take hours and hours and hours and hours.